nation, kindred, tongue, and people. Jamie Dunn, thank you so much again for allowing the Lord to use you to birth an idea whose time has come, and we are now prepared to listen to more instructions in your final presentation for today, after which Pastor Dijon Toll has further announcements on how all of us can be more involved and be further trained as his disciples. Thank you, Sister Dunn.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad to be back here this morning. And I have to tell you, the testimony and the message this morning could not have been more relevant, because now we have an opportunity to, now everybody can be a laborer, no matter where they are. And we can reach people who normally would not have been able to come into church. And so this is why this is so important. I know yesterday somebody mentioned that for some of the ministries, it seems like we had a half a dozen people involved. But what's really amazing is what you can accomplish with just faithful little steps and moving forward. So it can seem like you can accomplish a lot more with just a handful of people than you would ever imagine, because God
YouTube, type it up, see if it comes up.
Sorry, somebody needs to mute. So the idea is that when we are faithful, when we start with these small steps, this foundation, we can accomplish a lot more through the Holy Spirit working with us. So today we're going to talk about, from a church organizational perspective, from a leadership perspective, how to build a strong digital strategy. And like always, feel free to comment in the chat, ask your questions so we can, catch them at the end of the session. But let's get started. So the stakes of our gospel calling are too high. Your church or ministry can no longer go without a digital strategy. If one thing that has happened is COVID has shook us up and made us realize that the world is competing for people's attention, and it has never been more important to strengthen our digital curb appeal. So to reach people with our messages of hope and wholeness, it is imperative that we become just as effective as secular organizations at using digital media for communication and community building. In this presentation, we are going to cover how to establish your brand, the role of leadership, setting goals and measuring results through key performance indicators, choosing the right platforms for who you're trying to reach, your target audience, for developing and organizing an integrative communication strategy. So this idea of marrying the traditional with the digital, best practices for digital communication, and more. So by following the principles outlined in this presentation, and again, you'll get this presentation, you'll be able to establish a strong foundation for implementing a comprehensive digital discipleship and evangelism strategy. Now, I do want to start with, this note about facing criticism, because I know many of you, for many congregations, many members, this is new. And I'm still hearing from people that will say things like, if my church implements any of this, I'm leaving. So I know you're going to be facing some resistance. And so I want to speak to that for just a moment. Not everybody in your congregation will be on board, but I'm praying that the Holy Spirit moves upon people so that everyone can become part of this model. I wanted to give you a few talking points that you can use to help convince others to be part of this vision. Understanding that missionary efforts must have its foundation in Christ does not negate our responsibility to educate ourselves in the most effective ways to reach people with the tools available. I think of how much more effective we can be if we practice good stewardship through proper organization planning and communication best practices. So the Bible teaches us that a strong foundation is important for both personal spiritual health as well as for effective witnessing. I think we should take this personal spirit, this wisdom seriously, and do everything we can to share the gospel effectively with the tools that we have in our hand. Because remember, God asked Moses what was in his hand. And with the power of God, that staff performed miracles and led his children out of bondage in Egypt. So we are doing this. We are working in concert with the Holy Spirit. And I believe that this, at the end of the day, this is a matter of good stewardship. And this is a matter of leveraging every resource and tool that we have at our disposal to reach as many people as we can, because everyone is positioned to reach someone. Now, as leaders, here are some things that you can consider moving forward of how to start incorporating digital discipleship and evangelism in your church. One of the main things is you can start by just including digital strategies in your short and long-term goals and visions. You can dedicate funds for social media promotions. You don't need much. You can dedicate time for training you and your staff or volunteers. So thank you for being here today. And I know at the end, we're going to talk about a 6-part series that I'm doing with the NAD Personal Ministries team that you guys can also hop on and watch and get some more training, because we're going to go really in depth in that series. You can identify staff or volunteers who can take on social media as part of their duties, so their volunteer duties or their job duties. This might mean taking certain things off people's plates. One of the things that I'm very, very passionate about, and I think this is where until recently, I think the church hasn't done a good job of involving youth. But we have an opportunity, because they are digital natives, that we can invest in young people. We can include them in this mission, and we can give them the space to utilize their skills in this area for the church. And we can, most of all, just get out of the way and let innovation happen. Let your individual digital disciples in your church try new things, be creative, share their testimonies, explore different platforms. Because the nice thing about digital communications is if you do something and it doesn't work, it's very easy to do something else and move on. Because the great thing about digital communications is there's very little cost. So it's not like printing 5,000 flyers and you have the cost of the flyers and the flyers don't connect with people and nobody comes. The great thing about digital communications is if your team comes up with something and it's not as effective as you would like it, there's very little time and money lost. So let's begin by taking a moment to talk about branding. And really, branding is just a process of revealing a holistic picture of your organization to its audience by curating a perception, an experience, and an essence. Brands at their core are communicated, not just created. And so what you want to ask yourself is, how do you want your organization to be known? In the previous sessions, we talked about how oftentimes churches are unfortunately the building on the street, or right now the empty building on the street. But how do you want your congregation, your church body, not the building, to be known in your community? How do you want to be a center for positive influence? Where do you see yourself serving in the community, within its membership and the broader community? This is your brand. So brands are based almost entirely on people's experience with you. So once you understand your organization's mission and purpose, you can then shape your brand around those goals. So your brand name, some of you probably most of you already have a name, but if you're new to social media and you're thinking about how to brand yourself or how to rebrand yourself, here are some considerations that you can think about. So how you answer the previous question will help you determine your brand name on your social media handle. So your components of your brand strategy should cover 3 areas. This is marketing. So think of that as outreach or evangelism. You have public relations. So that's a mix of in-reach and outreach. And then of course you have corporate communication, which is speaking internally to your own people, your own membership. Now, what you ultimately want to consider is where you want your mission to fall. Are you going to be mostly outreach? Are you going to be mostly in-reach? And I'm hoping at the very least, I want to see churches become more of a mix between in-reach and outreach, so that not only are you serving your internal community, but you're actually reaching out to the broader community and becoming known. And what I've done here is kind of put the 3 categories and what those kind of brand names can look like. So if you look under marketing, so this is purely the path of creativity. This is entirely mission focused kind of name. So this is where you get things like Gorgeous to God or Angels in the Glen or any of these other types of ministries that really focus on just the mission and the vision. If you're going to take the public relations path where you're reaching people within your congregation, but you also have a strong evangelistic core, then you're going to do a little bit of a mix. So it's going to be, you want to encourage community awareness, but you're also tying it to your corporate brand. And so that's where we get titles like End It Now, NAD. So End It Now is sort of that mission vision, ending abuse now. And then NAD is, of course, the corporate identity of the North American division. And then the third path that you can take is entirely corporate. Now, I think for most churches, this is for most entities, I want to see them probably more in the public relations category, if possible, but your corporate identity is also fine. And you can also wrap it into sort of a tagline that encompasses your mission and your vision. But in the case of example for this is like NAD Adventist. It's entirely corporate. It's entirely internal. So for established ministries, you want to intentionally devise handles and construct social media profiles that can help you reshape or rebrand your image and voice for your online audience, because most of you are probably not choosing this for the first time. You can base decisions on the vision you want to cast. So if you want to recast your vision for the digital space or rebrand yourself, or you're new to the digital space, think of your names and your handles as a way to help others catch your vision, to understand your vision. So determine whether your primary goal falls into either of these categories, and then brainstorm name, handles, ideas with your team, board, or members that could fit into one, two, or all of the categories below. And I actually really encourage this to be sort of a group exercise, because that's where creativity can really flow, because you have all these different perspectives and you can come up with a way to reach your community. You know, in other brands and stuff that can be entirely, you can think of as entirely evangelistic, or things like Operation Christmas Child, So Others Might Eat, all these other like high level brands that we know of, their corporate identity might be a little bit different than their mission identity. So like Samaritan's Purse is their corporate name, but then their mission, their evangelistic arm, is something like Operation Christmas Child, as a sort of a sub brand. So as an individual church, you might want to think about how to title yourself. Our home church's name is Reaching Hearts. So reachingyourhearts.com, stuff like that. So we take it an entirely evangelistic route with our online presence. And the things that your branding should do, your branding and your digital strategy should work together and are part of an overarching grand communication strategy that includes and does not replace your traditional means of outreach and marketing, as well as that in-person experience. So all of this is working in tandem. It's working together to reinforce and support each other. So if you choose to redevelop your brand and your overall communication strategy, it'll take a lot of behind the scenes homework, and it, you know, please involve team throughout the process so that they can share in the ownership and they can, you know, include insights that you may not have considered. So the things that your branding should do is you want it to promote awareness. You also want it to be easy to remember, something that fosters emotional connectedness. So, you know, when we think of campaigns like End It Now, you know, ending abuse, stuff like that. Communicate your mission and value. That's your brand story. So things like reaching your heart or gorgeous to God. Encourage brand ambassadors. Something that gets people excited, your online brand should, and encourage them to share, to become digital door knockers, to become digital disciples. And it also helps shape those expectations for those you serve. That's your brand promise. So people should always know what to expect from you. And when we talked about before, having that consistency, having that consistent voice across all channels, that consistent experience, consistent in your touch points, will help foster that connectedness to your brand and help, you know, create that awareness within your community of how you can be a center of positive influence. And the other thing it does, and we often don't think about this, but it actually provides strategic direction to your team. Because if they know what your goals and your objectives are, it's easier for them to figure out where they fit in your mission and your vision, and how they can then fit into the digital discipleship and evangelism model. Now, one of the biggest problems I see with ministries using social media, hold on, is that they have no clear objectives. So you must determine your purpose and shape your online communications and brand accordingly. You want to determine your target audience and goals and key performance indicators, which is something we'll discuss shortly. So you're not only casting goals, but you're figuring out how to measure, how to see if you're even reaching your goals. And you want to conduct a thorough communications and social media audit, examining all the touch points, all the ways that you are communicating with people, and trying to figure out where it breaks down. So the components of your brand And again, you guys are going to get, this presentation. Your brand is its logo, its colors, its voice, its design, its images, even the words and the text, sort of what your tagline is. Your strategy defines how your organization, what your message is and how to say it. And your guidelines is a system of managing the brand visually. It doesn't have to be complex. It can be very simple and straightforward. It could be just simply a logo on all your images or whatever it is you want to do. So one of the important aspects of branding is consistency. Because whether you're starting from scratch or rebranding, you want to choose the same name and handle across all of your communication platforms. So try to pick a name that coincides with your domain. Try to pick the same name across all your different platforms, whether it's, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is. If you have a sub brand that's geared towards kids, it could be like Reaching Hearts for Kids is what we do. So you can add on to the brand, but you want that consistency because it prevents brand confusion internally and externally. People always know how to find you. And part of consistency is actually making sure all your social media profiles look consistent and use the same name. This really helps. Again, you don't want people to steal your brand, or you don't want someone to follow you on Facebook and then look you up on Twitter and someone has your brand name, but they're a totally different entity that you don't want to be associated with. So when you're going through this branding process, or when you're looking at your current brand, let's say you love how you already have your domain and you love your handles, all of that, make sure to reserve it across as many platforms as you can. Not because you're going to use all those platforms. You do not want to stretch your strategy too thin, but it's just a way to protect your brand so that somebody else can't start an account that might confuse audience members looking for you, because they might go to that platform and find you and be very confused. So a good example of this is when we were actually going through the branding process for Gorgeous to God. The original brand came from Australia, and the original content and the ideas we purchased the rights to from an Adventist ministry down in Australia. It was called GG Gorgeous or something like that. When we looked up GG Gorgeous, over here in the States, GG Gorgeous was basically dominated by a transgender model. And so when we did the research, we were like, okay, whoa, we don't want that kind of confusion. So let's come up with a different name that better speaks, because most people aren't going to know what GG means anyway. So we came up with Gorgeous to God because we wanted young girls to know that they are always gorgeous to God. So we reserved our name on a myriad of platforms. We used a consistent name. It's the same name on all the platforms. We use the same profile photo, consistent image. You see this with Angels in the Glen, End It Now, all these other different campaigns I'm part of. Same headline, blurb, or bio. We keep a consistent voice, and we always clearly articulate what we do and we offer and what people can expect from us. Now, your digital presence is an extension of your church and your brand into the online world. Your brand, like I said before, is how your ministry is perceived. How do you want to be known? And too often, like I said before, churches are simply the building on the corner and not perceived as a center for positive influence. So how we feel about a brand ultimately stems from our experiences with it. So when you're going through this process, think empathetically, put yourself into the shoes of the people you were trying to reach, of the people who are experiencing your brand now or for the first time, and view your ministry through an outsider's perspective. Evaluate that experience objectively and make changes based on your communication objectives and your mission and your vision. Develop a clear brand promise so people know what your organization has to offer, and make sure all aspects of your organization deliver on that promise. And this ties into this holistic approach to the seeker experience, because you want to utilize all of your possible brand touch points. And you guys can study this graphic below, but this includes things like your websites, your digital profiles, your even your business cards, your voicemail, any kind of advertising, any kind of your outdoor signage, whatever it is, these are all communication touch points. And again, you're going to hear me use the word holistic a lot. We want to step back, look at all the touch points, see where the experience potentially breaks down, and figure out how we can tell one consistent story. Because how your followers and community perceive your ministry influences their perception of not only your church and our church corporately, because like I said before, a lot of people don't even know who Adventists are. I don't know if that's the same in Bermuda, but I know in the United States we have very, very low brand recognition. But this also may, in fact, impact their view of God and Christianity and a relationship with God. So even if we haven't put any effort to fill in the blanks or haven't put any effort into managing our brand, in the absence of our story and us telling our story, people are going to fill in the blanks themselves. And your digital voice may be the only opportunity your followers have to see Christ's love demonstrated in their lives. So you want to really, really take a step back and think about how can we tell a consistent story, and what is our brand promise, and what can we deliver to people? So here's a couple of resources, but before we here's a couple of resources that you can dig into later. There's actually one book that I really, really recommend. It's called Story Branding 2.0. You can get it on Amazon. I thought it was very, very helpful in kind of shaping what it is that we're trying to accomplish in the digital space. There's a blog post for Branding for Ministry. If you have the book, there's a few chapters in that. Noam's a really great resource for checking the availability of potential names. And GoDaddy is where you can get domains, but there are, of course, other services that you can use as well. So now we must have a clear understanding of who we are to be able to clearly demonstrate our mission, vision, and value. So you want to create a brand that your target audience can recognize and connect with in a meaningful and positive way. So in this next section, we're going to talk about how to define your purpose. Of course, this is in the context of your brand for being on social media and utilizing digital tools. Because once you understand your purpose, which is, of course, tied to your brand, then you can frame your strategy accordingly. And you can identify how to measure success. So many ministries and churches fall into the trap of reactive digital communications versus proactive. And so we would plan a big event. So if we were to plan a big event, like a wedding or just any kind of evangelistic series, we would not wait to send out the invitations until the last minute. But somehow, because of the nature of how we've treated digital communications, we only use it to communicate events, and it always seems to be sort of an afterthought. So we should be planning our digital communications alongside our traditional communication. So we want to reshape our strategy so that we are always ahead of the ball. So when we understand our purpose, we can then frame our strategy and be more proactive in our approach. So once you have your brand, what you want to be known for, you can determine your purpose for utilizing digital tools. So too often I hear ministries say they are online because they know they need to be online, and that is correct. But consider these key areas of purpose for your ministry, because you and your team can then develop an ongoing approach that aims to achieve some of these objectives. So you could develop a clear objective for what you're trying to achieve through your digital communications. So in this case, an example I provided was to advance the gospel and positively influence your community. It can be any number of factors from like these 5 categories or even beyond based on what you're trying to achieve in your local community. But when we go online, whether it's for a personal ministry like we talked about yesterday, understand what it is you're trying to do, and that'll frame all of your actions and all your strategic planning. So if you're trying to serve the community, to help, let's say single mothers in the community, or children in the community, or elderly in the community, that is part of your purpose, whatever it is, or to just create general awareness or to reach the unchurched. These can all be part of your purpose, but it'll help shape your strategy once you understand. So now, once you have a purpose, you have your brand, you have your purpose. Now you can set goals. So when you know what you are trying to achieve, you can then set benchmarks for membership. And then you can come up with a budget and a strategy and a budget if necessary. So examples of some goals can be things like you want to increase your fan base and drive traffic to your website or traffic to your sermons or to your YouTube channel or whatever it is, or increase Bible study participation. Whatever it is you're trying to achieve, you can increase community awareness. Again, like how can you be a positive influence in the community? You can get to know your membership and your community better and understand their felt needs. We talked a lot yesterday and the day before about understanding people's felt needs and using digital communications to really listen. Because when we understand their felt needs, we can be more relevant in the way that we serve them. We can encourage social media ambassadors, encourage those digital disciples to share your content and invite people to events. You can increase meaningful engagements. You can actually have those conversation starters online. You can take prayer requests. You can do something a little bit more than just put content out. You can develop digital disciples who actively share their faith in the digital space. So this might be a goal that you have for your youth in your church or part of your membership is how can you rally your troops to start sharing their faith online as they would in person. Reach target groups with meaningful content, improve the lives of others, communicate core values, create connection, foster relationships, and define why you are unique or become a resource to the community. And part of the goal is because you just simply be setting expectations for those who interact with you and your team. So people know, again, what to expect from your church. What this also does is it helps to create clarity and focus, and every ministry's goal should be to help create clarity and focus. When everyone on your team, whether that's just a few people or an entire church, or sometimes some people might find that they're a team of one, but when you have clarity and focus, you can understand what you're trying to achieve, and it enables your congregation, your team members, whoever you have, to find a place within your mission so they can figure out where they fit in and they can start thinking creatively when there's a clear objective that we're trying to achieve. I hear a lot from young people, like they want to be involved in church, but they don't know where they fit in, and they don't really know what the church is trying to achieve. So I think when we create that kind of clarity, even within our own congregation, it can be incredibly helpful. So once you've identified why you'll be using digital media and who you're trying to reach, it's important to implement measures for success. These are also referred to as key performance indicators. And the type of metrics can be things like activity metrics. Like if you guys are doing this for the first time, then you can consider your benchmarks to be, we're creating content, we're creating videos, we're creating, we're sharing testimonies, we're doing things we haven't done before. That's an activity metric. Reach metric could be the number of people who are seeing your content, watching your videos, maybe certain demographics, like certain age groups you're trying to reach, or certain genders you're trying to reach. Engagement metrics. This is interactions and interest in your brand and content. Do you have an increase in prayer requests? Do you have people asking questions? Do you have people reaching out for Bible studies? Acquisition metrics. This could be changes in engagement over time or relationships developed. So this could be people who over a longer period of time are committing to be baptized or committing to the faith. And of course, you have conversion metrics. These are sales, like getting people. These are things like getting people to register for events, register for programs, download a free resource, other things like that. And retention metrics are basically people who end up becoming brand evangelists. Like they not only join your faith community, but they're out there sharing the gospel and serving others as well. Now, limited time. Let me be real. Most of you or your team will not have time to get into the weeds of your data. And you also want to avoid data paralysis because too much can be overwhelming. So I highly recommend that you identify just a few high-level metrics and track those to start. So if you keep track of those benchmarks and monitor change over time, perhaps even just monthly. So there's a lot of data that's available in the digital space. Whether you have metrics on your website, metrics on your social media profiles, there's a lot. But once you understand your objective, pick a few key performance indicators and track only those so that your team doesn't get overburdened with the data, because we all know that oftentimes it's one person wearing many hats or just a few people wearing many hats, and so that we don't want to add this as a burden. But it's important to track, because if we don't track, we can't gauge success, we can't figure out what's working, what's not working, and we can't grow and adapt. Now, some examples of key performance indicators are things like, again, those different metrics that we talked about, those different categories. But within these categories, I've broken up and actually included examples, things like, number of videos, podcasts, new content created by the team, number of volunteers, people who've registered, testimonies, quantity of followers or messages, stuff like that. This is something you can take and you can study. But if you're just starting out, I highly recommend that you start with the metrics in the first column. So those activity metrics, those reach metrics, and those engagement metrics, until you've established your online presence and have a really strong strategy with your team. So this might be what you're looking at for those first 4 to 6 months, because you're just getting started. You've never had a content strategy before. You've never had an engagement strategy before. So your key performance indicator is the fact that you are establishing these things. So these performance metrics are relevant to any platform. It can even be, relevant to your website. So consider this, study it. When you get back with your team or, your congregation or your volunteers or whoever you have, consider what it is that you want to achieve, how you're going to measure it, and then what that looks like. And just pick a few, because again, you don't want to be overburdened. All right. So what's next? You've established your brand. That's going to take a bit of work. Or, if you don't already have it established, or you want to rebrand a little bit online, how you want to be known. So you figured that out. You've defined your purpose for being online, and you've set goals and determined a way to track your progress. This should all be done within the context of your target audience. So if you haven't already, maybe, I know many of you have the book, but you can check out this article on understanding your audience or read the chapter in the book. So there's a link there under what's next. This is a whole other presentation, but once you know who you are trying to reach, you can figure out where to go. So this is actually, if you go to the chapter in the book, or you go to the website, there's actually a downloadable fillable form where you can actually go through and kind of figure out, what the core values of your audience are, some of their basic demographics, with things like age, gender, location, stuff like that. And then you can dig deeper into their core values, their motivating factors, stuff like that, to better understand them, and then sort of their cultural influences as well. So now, matching platforms to your audience. So remember, to reach your target audience, you must go to where they spend their time online and use the language they use. So you don't want to get overwhelmed. Start small. It's very easy to become overwhelmed by all the possibilities. So to avoid that, pick just 1 or 2 platforms that make the most sense for your ministry, your messages, and your available human resources and your goals. And 99.9% of the time, I would say that every church needs to have a Facebook presence and a YouTube presence, and that's where you can start. It's best, if you pick a few platforms and just do them well. A strategy that is stretched too thin will not get the results you were hoping for. And for YouTube, I sent you guys that guide on how to, maximize your presence on YouTube so that your content is findable. And that's something you can go through. So once you've identified the best platforms for your target audience, then you can proceed. I'm going to take a moment to provide a brief summary of the most popular platforms. And I can actually send you a link to an in-depth blog post that kind of goes a little deeper into each of the platforms, because right now I just don't want to assume that everybody has heard of every platform. So if you've been through any of my other presentations, if you've seen me present in other venues and the whole content creator presentation, we're going to talk about how you can take a piece of content and you can reutilize and repackage that content across many different platforms. But for now, we're just going to touch base a little bit on these platforms. And I'll send you guys a link at the end of this presentation that really goes in depth in these platforms. So Facebook, it spans all generations. Nearly 70% of people in North America are on Facebook. It is the largest country in the world. It does skew older, but it's highly interactive and it's great for community building. As I said before, most churches should start here. Instagram is for younger audiences. Most teens use it. It's highly visual. So if you have a part of your ministry that is really good at storytelling, I don't know if you guys have seen the Humans of Adventism or what Caleb Isley's doing. That's really, it lends itself very well to things like Instagram, and it's most engaging and great for creatives. It's great for young audiences. Twitter, it skews male. It does skew a bit younger. It's a microblogging platform. So those of you who are not familiar, well, Instagram is pictures. Twitter is short little snippets of text, and you can include a GIF or a picture, but it's really great for conversations on trending topics. And I recommend it for cause-based ministries where you have to be constantly involved in the conversation, but it's pretty labor intensive. Snapchat, this is if you really want to reach young people. And for this, I would actually recommend that you empower a young person, if you choose to go with Snapchat, to run your Snapchat. It's like these brief 10-second little interactions that kind of mimic real conversation. You can do geo filters where like you can change someone's face, or you can do a geo filter for an area where people can check in and use it. It was just really great for brand awareness. It's great for building trust and relationships with youth. TikTok is a viral video app. So it's like bite-sized YouTube videos, and it heavily skews young. They're bite-sized videos. It's all kinds of different collaborations. It's very, very creative. It has an editing feature. It kind of keeps going back and forth of whether or not it's going to be banned in the US. I don't know. It seems like it's safe for now, but it's really great for creative ministry content and youth. YouTube, I recommend it for all of you who are producing sermons. It is the second largest search engine in the world. It's primarily used for learning and entertainment. People go to YouTube and they type in questions. So they type in questions like, how do I know I'm saved? Does God really love me? Stuff like that. We should be creating content that answers those top search queries so that it gets pulled up to the top when people search that stuff. It's really great for repurposing your video content to be evergreen and findable. And so I recommend this definitely for churches who stream. So basically, going back to that guide that I sent out to you guys earlier, is once you've streamed your whole service, I really recommend it. Somebody then goes, cuts out the sermon, positions that sermon for search, and post it in a new playlist on your stream so that someone can find it. So let's say you do a sermon about where is God in uncertain times. Instead of having the whole like hour and a half, 2-hour service up where the person who's a seeker would have to go and, scroll and try and find the sermon, you repackage it so it starts right at the sermon and it starts directly with the question people are asking. But that 63-page guide I sent you guys will cover all of that. So social media, as you'll always hear me say this, because so many people get nervous and they think that we're replacing the old. And really what we're doing is we're building on the shoulders of evangelistic giants. We're amplifying traditional means. And so social media should be part of your comprehensive communication strategy that incorporates all means of communication that work together to maximize impact. Remember, digital tools are a means of amplifying our message to a larger audience and actually creating more engagement. So truly effective communication strategies work across all channels and platforms to reach people where they are, conveying one consistent goal or message. So this idea, we're going back a little bit, we're touching on branding, is to remember the rule of 7. So the rule of 7 is a key concept behind integrative marketing, because everyone, including our audience, experiences marketing messages and content overload. We're constantly being inundated with messages. Every time we open our phone, every time we drive down the street and we see a billboards, every time we see someone's shirt with a logo on it, we're constantly being inundated with messages. So therein lies the challenge. And this is why the rule of 7 is important, because it states that a person needs to be exposed to a message at least 7 times before they will take a desired action. So this could be register, RSVP, attend an event, join a Bible study, request a resource, send us a message, send us a prayer request, read this article, or participate in some other meaningful way. So to cut through the clutter, we must utilize every communication resource we have in a multi-channel, multi-platform approach. And so for churches, this means doing a mix of traditional and digital. So when you get up on your platform and you remind people about the upcoming event, and you remind them to share to their friends, and you remind them to forward the email, all that kind of stuff. You also, some of you might have text messages enabled. You can send out text messages, or in our case, it's actually the pastor's wife who just manually texts us all because we have a small church. Different ways, or whether you send out a flyer or a postcard, and then you also reinforce your message on your social media profiles and on your YouTube channel and on your Instagram. So it's a way of thinking, again, all those touch points and communicating the same message, because people are busy. I don't know how many times that I will bookmark something and I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. And then I don't actually do it until I see the next reminder message. They'll be like, oh yes, I need to take care of that now before I get busy and I forget again. Everybody's in the same situation. So effective communication strategies work across all your channels, all your platforms to reach people where they are. And again, conveying that one consistent message, that rule of 7. So for churches, you're going to want to leverage those in-person interactions, conversations, website updates, text messages, flyers, group messaging tools, and everything else in that list and more, because together, these efforts are going to help communicate your church brand. So it's important to consider how each of these communication tools can be used to reflect your message, your mission, and ultimately Christ. So we want to follow his example to draw people to the gospel. So being strategic is just being intentional with how you orchestrate all the different ways to distribute information, and making sure we use effective methods of presenting that information. So if you yourself find it difficult to make your members informed about events and opportunities, understanding and implementing this multi-channel principle will help improve awareness among your own congregation. Because again, the more informed they are, the more actively engaged they're going to be. And then again, they can be used as a reach vehicle for souls and all the other things that we talked about. Now, weaving social media into your strategy can seem daunting. I understand that, but it doesn't have to be. So to be successful, you want to plan and you want to organize across all your communication strategies. Now, I'm going to give you guys a template for a content calendar. You'll just have to update it for 2021 and for the platforms that you're actually using. But this is how you get organized. Oh, and there's a free content calendar right there. You can just grab it from that URL. So if you follow these steps, you'll be able to get a high-level view of your overall content strategy and how it fits together across all your communication channels. So you want to start with determining roles and dividing those responsibilities so that no one person is overwhelmed. Develop a content calendar. So this enables you to plan across all your channels and platforms. And I also personally recommend sharing this content calendar. So whenever I've worked in team situations with content planning, we actually use Google Sheets. And so everyone can go on and see like, okay, for Friday, let's say Jennifer is supposed to post the blog post. And then on Sunday, Alan's going to recut the sermon video and post it as, a dedicated video, something like that. And then one of the big things that really, really helps, again, tying into this idea of being proactive in our communications, not reactive, because a lot of people try to always post live. You can actually schedule your post in advance for flexibility, so you don't have to worry about keeping up with that tyranny of needing to constantly add content. So if you have the book, I recommend that you read the chapter in the creator role section. It goes in depth about these things. So let's go through a review of the process. So if we take another look at the process for building your foundation, remember this is all within the context of the digital discipleship and evangelism model we went through the last couple of days. So you want to develop your brand, define your purpose, set goals, establish performance metrics, choose your platforms, develop an integrative communications plan, and then get organized. This is how you build a strategy. Now, I want to take the last few minutes to kind of go through some quick best practices to help for something for you to keep in mind when you're implementing your strategy. So, batch, schedule, and create. This is my favorite. I will sometimes take like an entire day and just focus on creating content and scheduling it out for like the next couple of weeks. So when you schedule your content in advance, it helps you focus on big picture items without that urgency of consistent posting. So when you plan out your content, your regular content in advance, because there's always going to be that moment where something's going to change or there's going to be an urgent announcement. But if you take the time to schedule it monthly or in 2-week chunks, then you can focus your attention on things like engagement. So making sure people are getting a response. You can focus on community building. You can look at your data. You can even strategically plan for future events or future evangelistic series and other projects. This empowers you to be more proactive in your digital strategy as opposed to reactive. So freeing you up to quickly respond to comments or address any unexpected issues or changes. And let's say at the last minute something happens and you have an announcement, say there's a crisis. It's easy enough then to add that into the mix, and rarely does this happen, but if you have to pause content, that's also easy to do. But it means that you create regularity and consistency so people know when to expect content from you because it's regularly scheduled out. It also helps your team stay organized and less stressed. The next thing is keep it interesting. And so really what this means is just use a diversity of content and media to keep your audience engaged and interested with relevant content. So one of the things that is quite popular to do is have somebody who has a little bit of creative talent or can just use Canva, that one design software that I like to use that's online based, to pull quotes from the sermon. So I will do this sometimes for my own churches. I'll pull a quote or something that the pastor says during the sermon. I'll pop it onto a pretty image and then we'll post it and it gets a lot of likes. So this is a way that you can repackage some content. You can cut out the sermon, you can repackage it. You can take a 5-minute snippet from the sermon and push that out on like Facebook and IGTV or something else like that. So you can think of creative ways to repackage. You can take a section from the sermon notes and turn it into a blog. And so you can create many different formats that'll reach many different people for many different type of platforms. Now, social media is about building relationships and telling your story in such a way that your audience understands the value of your brand and engages in your content. The ideal ratio of posts on an organization's social media should be 80% engagement, 20% direct appeals, so to speak. In other words, 80% of the content posted by your ministry should engage your fans, demonstrate the need your organization feels, improve the lives of others, share what your ministry is doing in the community, update your audience on your goals and various efforts, showcase impact through testimonials, and other things. Like basically, it's that content that shows your value, that shows what you're trying to achieve, content that will improve the lives of the people who interact with it. And then the remaining 20% of your content can, ask for people to sign up to be volunteers or to register for something or to take another action, download a resource, because otherwise people feel like it's too much asking. But when they are emotionally invested in you and they see what you're doing all the time and they get value from their content, then when you make that ask, that direct appeal, they're more likely to actually take action. Commit to posting regularly or frequently. Quality of content is more important than quantity. So don't feel like you have to post every day of the week. Stay engaged in the conversation, but don't post too much and overwhelm your followers. A good cadence is one that maximizes engagement and minimizes unsubscribes on your account. Each audience is unique. Learn your audience. If you do a platform review, posting frequency recommendations are actually included on that article I'm going to send you. But like all things ministry, consistency is key. So if you have a Facebook and a YouTube page, and on YouTube, you basically stream live on Sabbath, or maybe your prayer meetings also stream live, and then you recut the sermon video and you post that separately on Sunday, and then you recut the children's story and you post that separately during the week, that's plenty. Or if the only thing you can do is stream and recut the sermon on YouTube, that's great. If that's all you can do, just be consistent with doing that every week. With Facebook, you can do the same thing. You can stream your sermons live. You can post, to a blog, image updates, quotes. Just post a couple times a week, but be consistent. That's more important than quantity. Write for your audience. Make sure to use the language of the platform. Because there is actually cultures and part of platforms we have to actually think of as a culture. And so think of all the cultural influences for your audience, for that platform, for your actual target audience, and follow the principles, we've outlined to write for social media and use strong visuals. There's actually, if you go to this link, it goes through how to write and how to construct strong posts for platforms and how to choose visuals. And there's also resources there for how to get some free or low cost visuals that will actually be really compelling for people. You want to use quality images that invoke an emotional response or tell the story. Optimize per platform. You can be creative. You can utilize contrast. It helps images stand out in the newsfeed. You can upload videos natively to each platform. You don't want to just link to YouTube, because platforms like Facebook actually throttle links to YouTube because it's competing with YouTube. So you want your videos, whatever you post to Facebook, to actually be natively hosted. As much as possible, partnerships benefit everyone. So you want to tag other accounts when appropriate or available, when sharing content about other organizations or ministry, or even people. Like one of the most popular types of content I see in church communities is like when we actually tag a person. So whether it's their testimony or it's just congratulating a senior for graduating, whatever it is, when you tag a person and you tag their family, people get really excited about that and they're more likely to share. So when you are using another organization's or a person's image or article, be sure to reference them and link to their account or website. So if a church member of yours or somebody within your conference writes something and you share it, be sure to tag them just so that they get the credit, but also they know you shared it and they can, help with your organic engagement by liking it. You want to always link back to your website. So your website is actually your biggest communication tool. So if you link back to your website and all your posts, that is really helpful. And I know previously we talked about how your website should have more of an evangelistic evergreen feel to it, because you're trying to pull people so that they can learn more about you. If as much as possible, always include a link, always include a call to action, and that's in that post on that link on how to write a strong social media post. Because what we don't want, and this is what I often see, is that someone will post a video and there's no text above it. So there's no teaser language to know why I should invest the time to watch the video. Or oftentimes I'll see like advertisements to register for an event or something, but there's no live link in the text to register. So the person would have to quickly memorize the link, go and type it into their browser. And what we want to do is we want to make it as easy as possible for people to take action. You want to promote your social media. So include your social media handles, your names, in all of your communication channels, such as your website, emails, and print materials. Let people know that you're online so that they have the option of connecting with you, and really, really take the time to encourage and rally your membership to connect with you first, because you can build out from them. And if you can activate them as a pod, as digital disciples, they can become that reach vehicle for souls. Because if they're connected to you on your Facebook, or they follow your YouTube channel or your Instagram account, whatever it is you have, they can get into the habit of regularly sharing your content. And that is, of course, a way for them to participate in discipleship and ministry. Engage in comments. So organize a team that can check daily for comments, questions, messages, and respond in a timely manner. I know we talked about this previously, because when people reach out to you, they expect a response. And especially when they reach out to you in a moment of vulnerability, you don't want them to feel like they're being ignored or rejected by the church, because every experience people have with us is going to influence their perception of our faith, even of God. So we really want to be present and aware and accessible. So, because remember, every opportunity to connect is an opportunity to grow the kingdom of God. And lastly, don't give up too soon. So we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but the changes in your post engagement when you revamp your strategy should show immediate and positive results. But over time, your data, your responses might plateau or dip, or even, especially during the holidays, Christmas, everybody's data falls off like the cliff. Like nobody is interacting with social media profiles because they're all busy with Christmas. So you'll learn to see and you anticipate those yearly patterns, but you want to keep pressing forward, because oftentimes efforts fail because people give up too early. We're kind of primed in modern society for those quick wins. We want to do something and then see it go viral, but that's not how it works 99.999% of the time. It takes consistency. It keeps constantly reaching out to people and building that community. We have tons of free resources if you want to learn more. There's the sdadata.org website. It has over 500 resources on it. My website has some resources on it too. Go check it out. And if you haven't already, you can get the book. It covers all of these details all these topics in detail, and much, much more. It's available in print and digital versions. So now we have a good amount of time for discussion. So let's get to that. All right. Oh, can you please define natively hosted? So what that means is when the video is uploaded directly to the platform that it's being posted on. So oftentimes what people will do is the video will be hosted on YouTube, and they'll link to YouTube from something like Twitter or Facebook. And the problem with that is those platforms really want people to stay in the platform. They want people to stay in Facebook because that's how they make their money, through advertising dollars. So the best way, Facebook rewards you, and actually any platform rewards you, if you upload the video directly to the platform. So someone's asking, do you find that communication staff are the key to making this info work best? I think often yes, because they have, for like the conference level, it's fantastic. You have professional communicators who are able to implement and kind of help churches with these ideas, with this brand building, with all the different things that we talked about. The local church level, it's good if they can get mentorship and guidance from professional communicators, but more often than not, they don't have access to that other than the conference. So as much as possible, if the communication staff can provide guidance to churches, that is always helpful. Yes, teamwork makes the dream work. And sometimes it's amazing what creative and what talents you can actually find in your own congregations. With one of the churches that I'm working with right now to launch a series, basically a pilot to the unchurched built on these principles, they actually found somebody who was sitting in their pews. He had been there for a while, who actually has a whole background in video editing and all kinds of stuff. And so he's going to help with the YouTube channel. So you might have a lot of untapped potential within your congregation of people who are either eager to learn to do it or people who already have some skills. Somebody's asking the name of the book. The name of the book is Digital Discipleship and Evangelism. And what I'll do is I will type in I can give you guys a link to information on the book and where you can buy it. Here, I'll do this. And then there's another question I just saw here is, please speak to the size of the budget that would be needed and what would it include? So for digital communications, if you're dealing with all volunteers and stuff like that, the creating the content won't cost much. It'll just cost time. Now, I highly recommend, if you don't have a designer, that you use a platform like canva.com that has all the templates and really affordable stock images. I think they're like $1 a piece, or if you get a pro account, it's $120 a year. Canva is a lifesaver. That's always really helpful. When it comes to actual advertising, so if you're not paying for people to write the blogs or to design the images and stuff like that, then you have very little cost. But if you're going to actually do social media advertising, I pay personally for my church's social media advertising, and we spend somewhere between $300 to $500 a year. This year, we have not spent as much because, we just had to kind of right the ship and readjust, but it doesn't take a lot of money. So if you have an upcoming program, you might spend $50 promoting it through targeted advertising through like Facebook and Instagram, something like that. Because the great thing about how these platforms have positioned their advertising is it's great for small budgets. You can do a lot with just a little. Let's see. Yeah, somebody's writing, Canva is really great and easy to use. Yes. There's actually one time I put out something when I was still at the North American division for digital evangelism strategies, and somebody commented and they're like, you got this template from Canva? And I wrote back and I was like, yes, I did. Because we don't have a designer on our team. And to me, they just have really clean, really stylish stuff. And now they have animation that's actually really easy to use. Oh, I like these. Somebody's posing some purposes. Reaching the rejected and those uninterested. That is a perfect example of a brand purpose, or a confidential digital ear to those who are not heard. Beautiful. So again, we want to be a positive center for influence. We want to be a place where people can ask their questions without judgment. Because oftentimes we kind of shy away from people because a lot of people are actually a little angry at the church, or they're angry at faith, or they're angry at God, and we don't know how to reach them because we don't respond well when they show their emotion or whatever. But if we can be a place that just listens and understands, I can't tell you with the End It Now campaign how many times that we have taken someone from raging at us online because they were abused in the church and they felt like the conference hit it, or something happened, or they were rejected from the church because this or that. And we take them from that sort of emotional state where they're angry at us and saying that we really don't care. And we take them to a point where they're a testimony basically. And they say, I have never felt heard before by the church, because what we have found that 99% of the time, people just want to be heard. And oftentimes just by simply saying, I'm so sorry that someone in the church did that to you. How can we help you? Can we listen? Can we pray with you? It really diffuses the situation, and it opens the door for that person to be reconnected with God and reconnected with their faith. So someone says, say that again. Every church needs to have Facebook and a YouTube page. Yes, that's really where you should start, because everyone's on Facebook except for the very young, and YouTube, everybody uses YouTube. And so you can position your content for search on YouTube if you follow the principles of that guide that I've been sending to you guys from our website. To determine our target audience, the government statistics census reports can be used. Yes, that's actually a good resource. Now, I know some of you guys, you might be determining your target audience based on the people you have as a resource, so who you think you can reach, but you can also dig into your local community and to the census to see who you have and what their situations may be, and that might help you shape your goal of who you're trying to reach. Missions of Mercy. That would be beautiful. And that would be a beautiful handle. Actually, I could go to probably know him right now and see if there is, let me see, Missions of Mercy. And so if you just go to know him, it'll let you know where it's available. Just looking at it. Okay, it's not available on Facebook, so that's disappointing. But you can come up with some deviation of that isn't being used, because that's really beautiful. That's an example. That's an example of a beautiful evangelistic name. Can we get the printed material that you covered? The printed material. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Carolyn. Can you clarify what you mean by printed material?
She may mean, do you have it in a book form?
Oh, in the book form. Yes. Well, that would be the book. And I sent that link below. We need more communications-minded people to strengthen our witness for Christ. The conference needs more help in this regard. Yes, I agree. I would love, I think in order for the church at every level to prioritize technology, we need communicators like never before. And so anybody who has that talent, anybody in your congregations have that talent, please empower them. Because what's interesting is for so long, we've been really good about recognizing spiritual gifts, spiritual gifts of, hospitality and preaching and teaching and sort of the traditional spiritual gifts. But now it has become essential that we start recognizing other things that I think fall into that are gifts from God, things like technology, the ability to communicate well, because communication is a skill. Where so often words can be misconstrued and stuff like that. Communication is very important. And so I think when we start recognizing these other talents and how they can contribute to the mission of the church, we can empower and sort of inspire people to get involved when they didn't really think they had a place before. Yes, please involve the youth. Let me see. Okay. All right. I think I'm caught up from there. Yes, students at school have levels of IT classes. Even without IT classes, like you can give them a phone or whatever, and they can figure stuff out really quickly. Especially teens may be willing to help out at church, even as trainees. They would love that. So one of the things that youth really want is they desperately want mentorship, because we have so much. They want mentorship and they want opportunities to be involved. And we know that people stay in the church if they're involved in the church and if they're valued for what they can bring to the table. Youth are digital natives. They instinctively know how to use these tools, these technologies, and they're so creative and they're so funny. Like I look at some of these like Christian TikTok videos and they're just funnier than me. I don't know where they come up with this stuff, but they make faith relevant. They make it interesting. And anytime that we can inspire and empower them to lead in these areas, and with, of course, oversight and mentorship, because they need the wisdom from the older generations that have been doing this longer, but they really want the opportunity. So if you can empower, if you can include them, let them be creative. Oh yes, I can post my presentation. Sorry, I hadn't done that yet. I'll post that here. And then I'm also going to send it to Pastor Millett so that he can send it out to everybody again for whoever didn't get it. Oh, someone's asking, can I share? Oh, Pastor Manders is saying, can I share the Somerset intro to prayer meeting? It's our Super Tuesday prayer meeting. Sure, absolutely.
I gotta learn to see if I know what I'm doing first. Just a minute.
Does anybody have any other questions? Oh, I guess he's got it coming up, so this is great. That's really cool. Who put that together?
Trying to get back just a minute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's a little intro to our Tuesday night prayer meetings, and we thought, and we used something like that for our evangelistic series that we've had recently.
Mm-hmm.
It took someone very professional to get that together for us, and I think they did a fantastic job. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about that
Mm-hmm.
introduce a message like the Hamilton Church pastors on our ATV station, and something like that coming out of Hamilton on YouTube, or I see Pastor Paul sitting there with his Daniel and Revelation, you know, he little intro, something like that. I think it's a very catchy little brand, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's good. And I think anytime too, like if there's a URL or anything that can help with a call to action, you can also end with that as well. So people know where to go to get more information. In addition to, like, if you post it on Facebook and say people start sharing it, you want to make sure in the teaser language, you have a teaser, like what it is, and then a link so that people can take an action or they can learn more. Because the idea is, if we don't know how far it's going to go on the internet, you don't know who's going to come in contact with it. So you always want to really make it easy for them to take that action, go to the website, learn more, and see how they can get involved. So that kind of stuff is great. And the other thing too is, I would love to see churches like in conferences and local communities working together. So if, one church creates certain content, because again, you can curate content. So let's say you have a church that's focusing on teens and you have another church over here that focuses on the elderly, but they have overlapping. You can share each other's content. And you can actually work together, because I think our churches have become very siloed. And I know there's a lot of dynamics there that perhaps someone like me doesn't understand. But the more that we can collaborate, the better, and share resources and share the messages, because a sermon or a short like blog or something like that can be relevant to more than one congregation. And so that also lowers the burden of creation. So if you have one church that focuses on one type of content and another church that focuses on one type of content that is geared towards a different target audience, and these churches are in close proximity to each other, you can start collaborating on content. And
I just would like to say that some of my creative juices I got from Pastor Faison, who's sitting on that in front of that Bermuda flag there.
Yeah. So someone's asking me, how much time do I spend on managing our church's social media on a weekly basis? So it's me and a couple other people that post. Gosh, at this point, because we're such pros, because we're so used to doing, I maybe spend like 5 minutes, 10 minutes a week, because I just post 1 or 2 things a week and somebody else posts some other content. So it's distributed. Now, if we have a campaign coming up and I do some advertising and stuff, then that's a bit more work. But it's say we hope to do like an evangelistic series or something for our church, and the stuff that we've done in the past, that has maybe taken me a few hours of work total to create the content, to promote a series or a program or something that we're doing online, and then schedule the ads for it. But I've been doing this for a long time. So for someone who's new, like if you have somebody who's willing to jump on board and do it, and it's say you have a series coming up that you want to promote and it takes the person 5 hours or longer, that's okay, because they're new and they're learning. So it's going to take them a little way. But the more we do it, the quicker we get at it. Just like I know pastors that have been doing this for ages, they can write a sermon in just a few hours. That's amazing. People who are less experienced, it might take them a few weeks to write a sermon. So now someone's asking me, and they say it's a silly question, but it's not a silly question. What experience do you have found that WhatsApp has played in digital discipleship? WhatsApp is actually really big outside of the United States. So what we have found is, particularly in, particularly in Africa, we have these stories of people sharing video snippets and all kinds of stuff and sending it to each other. Same in India, same in, I think certain parts of Asia, but it's not as big in Asia. But some of these countries, people are really using WhatsApp to share short messages, to share downloadable videos and stuff like that because of other data restrictions. So we've actually seen it be quite popular in South America. There's someone who has a huge WhatsApp following. He's like in contact with like 900 people. He's a retired, I think, police chief or something down in Brazil. And he uses WhatsApp like crazy for the gospel. Do we have to wait for an organized program to start using social media? No. So if you already have a social media presence account, or if you don't have a Facebook account yet, I recommend setting it up and getting started, sharing what you have, and then figuring out your team and getting organized to kind of to shape it moving forward. But one of there's a quote, and I'm going to probably butcher it, but it's from Ellen White. And the essence of the quote is this: that souls are being lost because of want of preparation, meaning like we're spending so much time planning that we're not actually ministering. So there's a balance. I want you to plan. I want you to go through this full process. But if you're a single person who just wants to start getting involved in digital discipleship and evangelism, there is nothing stopping you. You can start sharing content. You can start sharing video snippets, sermons, all of that right away. You can start connecting with people right away. You can start taking prayer requests right away. You don't have to have it all figured out to get started.